have a little bit of levity. So here we go. Two little old ladies, Doris and Jackie, were sitting on a park bench outside the local town hall where a flower show was in progress. Shortly, Jackie leaned over and said, "Life is so boring, we never have any fun anymore. For $10, I'd take my clothes off and streak through that stupid boring flower show." "You're on," Doris said, holding up a $10 bill. So Jackie slowly fumbled her way out of her clothes and completely naked, streaked as fast as an old lady can through the front door of the flower show. Waiting outside, her friends soon heard a huge commotion inside the hall, followed by loud applause and shrill whistling. Finally, the smiling Jackie came through the exit door surrounded by a cheering and clapping crowd. "What happened?" asked her friend. "I won a $1,000 prize. First prize for best ride arrangement." Life is short, break the rules. So we're very pleased to announce that we are live streaming tonight's meeting on Facebook and on YouTube for those members unable to attend. We hope to be able to do this going forward, and we'll see how it goes. We have Adam and Leslie helping out. So you would have got the minutes of the last meeting as you came in the door. They were there on the table. And I'm wondering if anybody has any comments. If there are no comments, can we have them passed? Can somebody please hold up their hand to pass them? Thank you, and can we have a seconder? Thank you, Amy. All in favor? Thank you. So for the financial report, we really don't have a treasurer yet, although Claire's going to be our treasurer. Hopefully that will become official next week. So I'm just announcing that the main account has a balance of $2,866.91 after we paid for all the expenses of the political forum. And for our new senior fund, senior community fund, the balance is $74.39.94 after a $400 check came out, and we have $1,500 coming from the Rotary Club of Barrie. So I just want to talk a little bit about our seniors community fund. If you haven't heard about it, please go to barriecarp.org, and on the right you'll see Seniors Community Fund. So what we're doing as a pilot project, and I'm hoping we can do this really well so the other chapters will pick it up. Almost 20% of seniors in Ontario live below the poverty line. When you think about the rent in Barrie being the third highest in Canada, when you think what it costs you when you go to the grocery store, how are these people paying rent? How are they buying groceries and toiletries and paying for transportation and all the other needs like pharmaceutical needs? It's impossible. So we thought, maybe we can do something. So we decided that we would set a goal of a minimum of $25,000, that we would hand out amounts to these seniors in between $100 and $500 for whatever their need is. We will not pay out cash. We will either give a gift certificate or we will write a check to whatever their need is. And I'm really, really proud to say that we have now had our first recipient, that we've handed out a $400 check towards a wheelchair for a lady who needed help. These people are going to be shy and proud and may not want their names put out there. So we need you, not only to donate, but to help us find these recipients that are in need. We're reaching out to doctors and nurses and organizations, and we hope that you will keep your eyes and ears open. We hope you will also advertise for us. Adam, one of our board members there at the camera at the back, made a nice poster for us, which is up on the wall there right beside the door. Please have a look at it going out, because we not only need you to give donations, we need you to find recipients. And if we can do this right, we can get other chapters involved and we can make a difference. So thank you for your time. So tonight, we've got a very special night for you. We found out the mayor was coming at 8 instead of 7. 30, so panic. Now what do? But we've had some real luck. We have now 3 presenters instead of 1. And tonight, our first presenter is Janet Morozuk. Had to pronounce that right. So she has at-your-speed computer training. She's owned and operated with 25 years experience with both Mac and PC operating systems and their applications, web, social media, and graphic design. She also teaches part-time at Georgian College and has received many various rewards over the years. So proud to have her. I'm going to hand it over to Janet. And after that, she's not only talking to us tonight, she's also allowing us to bring in our second presenter, which is Dr. Salaba, who is the president of the Ontario Optometrists Association by Zoom. And we can do this through Janet. So welcome, Janet.
Well, there's a few of you here that might be extremely knowledgeable in computers. There may be some of you that are a little.
Can you use the microphone?
Okay, so there's a few of you that could be really good at computers, very experienced at computers, or your tablets or your cell phones. There might be some of you that are not too bad. You can muddle through, maybe go online and check out the nearest websites. Or you might be a rank beginner. So I'm going to ask you to put your hands up. There's 3 levels. Who of you are really good at computers? How many of you are not so bad? You can hold your own on the computer, going through web and things like that. And then there's a few of you that are rank beginners, that don't even know how to start the computer up, nonetheless get online with anything. You're not alone, okay? The thing is, since COVID hit, we have all been pushed into what we call a Zoom world. It used to be called Zoomers when you were like a Zoomer, right? That's the way you were. The Boomers were the Zoomers. Now everybody is Zooming. And that's because we've needed to communicate over the past 18 months plus in order for us to keep up with our family and friends and business as well. So what I'm going to do today is kind of give you a brief overview of what Zoom is. And from there, if you have any questions, we can look at that later on. But right now, we're just going to look at the application itself, give you a couple of tips on what you can do with it, and we'll go from there. Okay? How many people have actually used Zoom? All of you. Almost all of you. That's perfect. Okay. I'm just going to get us started on here, and I'm going to yell. I'm going to try and project as best as possible. Okay, so here is my Zoom window. So you're going to see me in my face in that. And if you notice, along the bottom of the screen here is going to be the apps or the items that we can do in Zoom. And the interesting thing about it is that we can actually customize it for our own purposes. Now, because I am what's called the host, so I'm the one that set up the meeting, I have a little bit more than what most people might have, because I also have the business version. So if you are a person that is just using the freebie side of things, you typically only have about 40 minutes. Have you ever noticed sometimes you're on a call with somebody and all of a sudden the clock comes up and says you have 5 minutes left? So now you're panicking to try and do that. If there's 2 of you, sometimes what will happen is Zoom will say, that's okay. We're going to let you keep going for a few more minutes, or they may let you go on. I've actually been on a call with 2 people for over an hour, and they only had the freebie version of it. So sometimes it works for you, other times it doesn't. So I won't guarantee that you'll go past that 40 minutes. If that happens to you, you just reconnect on a different invitation. Just resend it and get your next 40 minutes up for free. Okay, they don't stop you from doing it over and over again. It allows you to do it on a regular basis. If you've got the business version, like myself, I can take up to 100 people on a Zoom call. And in that case, I can go as unlimited amount of time as I want. And no, I'm not selling you on doing that. Where it happens is when people wanted to do Thanksgiving around their family dinners and things like that. So sometimes we might lend somebody our password in Zoom to be able to do that. So I would host my Thanksgiving dinner at my place. Meantime, I have my family coming through the rest of the other Zoom calls. So sometimes you can find somebody in your family that might have a business account that may be able to allow you to do that. So with Christmas coming up, hopefully we'll all be in person, but if you can't, maybe see if your family, if there's anybody in your family that can Zoom you in. It's amazing how much that is really good for people. One of the other things that I want to kind of bring to your attention when you're doing this is you're going to notice that there is a screen here, and as I turn my head, you see my profile because my camera is at the top of my computer screen. No different than on your tablet. And what happens is a lot of people, and I'm going to do this on purpose, will do this. So you're seeing my necklace, you're seeing maybe my double chins, you know? Or if I push it too far back, all of a sudden you're seeing up my nose. So please, try not to do that. Try and have it so that at least it's forward, okay? That's one of the things you want to watch for. I have a client that he reminds me of the guy from Tim the Tool Man, where he's always looking over top of the fence, and all I can see is his eyes and part of his cheeks, and that's it. And I keep saying to him, please pull your screen down. That's really important because people want to see your face. They don't want to see just your eyes or the top of your head or down around your chest and that. The Nabob has a beautiful commercial where the guy is actually in a business meeting and all you see is his shorts. You know, so those are the things that you have to be careful of. So just watch your screen presence. What you see on your screen is actually what everybody else is seeing. Okay, so just be aware of your surroundings. The other thing is, now we're lucky it's at night. We do have this white background, but if the sun is streaming through, all of a sudden it'll look like you've got a halo. Okay, now some of you may be angels, others, maybe not so much. But the thing is, you don't want to be blocked out by that sun either. So be really careful of what's in behind you. Sometimes we have to put a screen up behind or close the drapes. In this case, we've got the shutters in the background. So it makes it a lot easier for us to be able to work with that. Another thing that you want to watch for is you'll notice down at the bottom here says my name. That is what everybody else sees. So when I want to do something that's a business, or I'm changing, maybe I'm in with my Rotary Club, or I'm working with my business, or I'm at the college and I'm doing some work from there, I may want to change what I'm seeing as my profile. So all I have to do is, and this is really a good thing to know if you've got a mouse. I'm going to just right click on the top, just in this corner here, anywhere within the screen, and it will say rename. So if you're going online with somebody and you're using somebody else's computer, it will log into their name, and all of a sudden, I've seen it a few times where the men are borrowing the wife's computer or tablet, and they've got the wife's name underneath it. And of course, everybody's going, who is that, you know? So in this case, I just want to hit rename, and I'm just going to type in after that, at your speed, and just hit enter, and it automatically changes it for me down here, okay? So that's one of the things that you want to identify yourself all the time, okay? So again, that's just a right click on the screen, down to rename, and go in there. Now, if you happen to have a picture of yourself, hopefully you do, you can actually edit your profile. So when people see that you've closed your video so that you're not actually seeing your face in that, and you've decided that you need to go grab a coffee during a meeting, we don't do that very often, but if there's a break in a meeting, you might say, oh, I'm going to go in and have a coffee or a tea, I'm going to go get one. You don't want to leave your screen blank. So what we do is we go in and we stop the video. And when we do that, you'll see, I'm just gonna cancel this, stop video. This is what they see on the other side here, is that particular picture. Sometimes you might see on different programs just their initials. So it might be JM, for instance, on my initials, if I'm working in Teams or WebEx. Those are different other type of Zooming type programs. But what this does is this at least lets them know that I'm still around. It's just the fact that I haven't logged off, that I'm still there, but I've taken a break, and that I'm not accessible at that time. By going back down to the bottom and saying start video, I can come back up, and here I am again in the visual. So when I'm looking at this and I want to change that picture, I just have to go into edit profile and hit my change picture. And so that way you can put a seasonal picture up if you want. It may be something that may be your professional picture if you're in business. You always want to make sure there's something in there. If you're using a cartoon or a cartoon character as that, we had the gentleman that liked to use the, I can't remember the banker on The Simpsons. Do you remember what his name is? I never like watching the show, so I don't know what his name is. See this? It says the meeting has ended after 40 minutes idle time, because I've been sitting around, right? So I'm just gonna close that, I'm gonna start it again. Okay? So in this case, here, let's hope it works. Is it working again, Adam? Okay. So in this case, if I'm going to go in and I'm going to edit my profile picture, I'm not gonna change it, but I'm just gonna hit that change. So this is where you would go and add that picture. Now back to my story. He put in the picture of the banker, he was a lawyer, and he put a picture of this cartoon character on his screen. The problem with that is it kind of has a negative connotation, you know, because this guy was really stingy and you know, nose to the grindstone kind of person. So if you are not that way inclined, that is something that you really want to be careful with. Okay, you need to be able to choose a character and make sure that you're able to take that character in light of what they are. Okay. The next one I'm going to show you is the chat, and that's this one down the side here. By clicking on the chat, I can now type in a message that can be anybody in the room. So in this case, if I had 10 or 100 people, I can say, how are you today? Right? Now, just hit enter, and it becomes part of the chat. If somebody was online with me, they could reply to it. The other thing is, you'll see where it says new, right down here, or to everyone. I'm just gonna click here. If there was more than one person in this room here, that person would actually end up being in that list, and I can direct the message directly to them. I don't have to have it with everybody seeing what I'm talking about. All right, I could say, oh, that's a really nice haircut you got recently, because all of us were looking for haircuts, but not everybody needed to have that announced. So that's something that might have been put into a chat that could have been private as well. Okay. The other thing that I want to check out on is this one here where it says reactions. Now, a lot of times when somebody is wanting to ask a question and they're going like this, that does not get the person's attention, because you could be on a second or third page. There's some of our meetings where we can't see everybody on the screen. If you're on a tablet, typically an iPad, you can only see up to 9 people, okay? If you're on a cell phone, you can only see 1 person. If you're on a computer, depending on typically the size of your monitor, you may only be able to see up to 25 people. And even then, they could be quite small. So if you're in a room of 50 or 60 or 100 people, they're not seeing you waving your hands, trying to get somebody's attention. So what you do is you raise your hand down here in the reactions. And what that does is, in all of the area of all of these, you automatically get prompted to the first page at the top left-hand corner. So that automatically directs the speaker to the attention that somebody's raised their hand. Once you've finished with your question, and they've answered it for you. You can turn around, go back to your reactions, and now you can lower your hand. And you still stay at the top there, but whoever is the next person that raises their hand is now going to kind of bump you over. Kind of moves around the screen that way. So that's one of the things. The other thing that's really kind of cool is we can do a celebration here. So you'll notice there's a clapping hand, there's a thumbs up, there's a crying, but laughing crying, that you're laughing so hard you're crying. You've got the O sound, like, oh, is that really for real? You've got a heart, and then you've got the horn with all the confetti coming out of it. So as soon as I go in and I give up a clapping hand, that clapping hand shows up here on the screen, and everybody can see that, all right? You don't have to type it in the chat and say well done or anything else like that, because if you're always distracted by the chat, you actually don't see what's going on your screen. And that's what's really important, is what's going on your screen at that point. So be really, really careful about using the chat a lot, okay? We can save the chat and then distribute it later on, but anything that is private, so anything that has been put on there, and like, say for instance, I had a chat with Roger on here, specifically with Roger. When they save the chat, that conversation between Roger and I is not part of the conversation that they see. That file gets erased in that respect because of privacy. So you really want to be careful when you're doing something like that. The next thing is under More. And this is where the fun begins. And it depends again on the version of software that you have of the chat, of Zoom. There's one here that's called breakout rooms. And when we create a breakout room, that breakout room I can automatically assign, or you can assign it. So if there's 20 or 30 people and you're in a meeting like you are today, but you're all on Zoom, you can all kind of go into separate rooms and have a chat amongst each other. Roger, your club does that, or your chapter does that. What did you think of that?
That was great. So when we have visitors in our chapter for the first time, there's a host that'll take the visitors at the beginning of the meeting into a separate room to tell them about what the meeting is what's gonna happen in the meeting.
Yeah, so it can be used in all sorts of ways. It can be really enjoyable because of the fact is you can celebrate something that's happening for that one particular person. I'm working with the Rotary Club and we're doing training sessions on Rotary. And what's really kind of cool is we got 24 people put into 4 different rooms, so there's 6 of them discussing questions about this. So if you need to do something along that line, even with family members about, your vacation, you don't want to have 15 people trying to talk all at the same time on Zoom because you're not going to hear everybody. When you've got people trying to raise their hand saying, oh, come on, let me talk, or I keep getting bumped out. That's where you have to be really, really careful, okay? So having the chat rooms or breakout rooms, you can assign how long you want it to be. It could be 5 minutes, it could be 10 minutes. You can make it so that they automatically break out after that time. There's all sorts of really neat things that you can do with breakout rooms and go from there. So I'm just going to close that because I'm not going to create that room. I'm not going to go in there by myself. But these are all little things that can happen with Zoom that makes your life a little bit easier when you're trying to communicate with family and friends as well. The other thing is the mute. And this is what I'm going to close off on. The mute is probably one of the most used and ununderstood portion of Zoom. I don't know how many times I've been in meetings and I have people saying, can you hear me yet? Can you hear me yet? Right? And meantime, they're on mute. So you'll see down at the bottom here a little mute sign. Okay? That's a microphone. And when you go and you put the slash through it, that means right now you're muted. All right? Now the really neat thing about this is if I go and use my space bar, I can unmute myself for just a very short space of time. While I'm holding that mute sign down, or my space bar's down, that stops me from having to touch the mute button. All I'm doing is I'm holding my space bar. The problem I've got is, if I have an open chat conversation on my screen, so if I was replying to somebody here, that feature will not work. So you just have to make sure that you're not in the chat at the time, but just by hitting my space bar, you'll notice the red line has come off of that temporarily. As soon as I lift my finger off of it, it allows me to be able to take that off. So I'm just gonna put myself back, on mute. I unmute myself permanently. So be careful, because when you're unmuting and muting yourself, some people, like the host, will actually mute a whole room and then ask you later on to unmute when you want to talk or when you've been chosen to talk. So that's something, but just remember to put yourself back on mute when you finish talking. That is extremely important, okay? The other thing, and this is called your bandwidth, and that's the amount of speed and the ability for your internet to actually work through your computer. When you're on Zoom, you're actually using audio and visual. And what that means is that it's using some of that bandwidth up that you're using in your Wi-Fi. So for instance, if you live in Innisfil like I do, we've got some of the worst power or cabling around when it comes to Wi-Fi. And if I have 2 or 3 applications, like I constantly do, running in the background of my computer, my audio and basically my audio starts to break up. That's where all of a sudden you get kicked offline, or you may end up having a real broken up internet connection. And what'll end up happening is you're talking, and the next thing you know, it falls off. You get kicked out of Zoom for one reason or another. So one of the best ways of trying to get around that is to close the applications down you're not using. So if you're not using Word or Excel or PowerPoint or some other programs that you're using in the background, turn them off, okay? It will help to build the strength in your bandwidth as well, so you're a lot more stable. Sometimes you'll get a little internet connection problem saying that your bandwidth is too unstable, right? If you get that, make sure you close down your Google. That's one of the, or if you're using Internet Explorer or any of the other web browsers that are out there, close them down so that you're not using that bandwidth up, because you're sharing that information there. The other thing is, sometimes what'll happen, I don't have it here on the desk, you have to call in from your phone and you're using your computer to look at the screen. You have to mute yourself and turn off the audio off of the phone. Otherwise, you're gonna have this bouncing back and forth and audio feed problems. So if you get a bandwidth message that says that you're not very strong, sometimes what the best thing, or you're freezing up, the best thing to do is to shut down and reboot with everything turned off, and then just go into your Zoom meeting, okay, by itself. That's typically the way we try to strengthen that up. So, does anybody have any quick questions? Because I know we're really cut for time, so I don't want to have any kind of shortcomings from anybody else, but do you have any questions? Roger?
Is the, you said something about a free Zoom application, is that open for everybody to get?
Yeah, everybody can have a free Zoom. You just go online to zoom.us, sign up, and they'll sign you up. You just put in your email and your phone number, etc., that you need to put into the application, and you can automatically go on, and it's free.
No charge at all?
No charge at all. And it's best to have the application loaded on your computer or your tablet or your phone, so that you're not using up that extra bandwidth by being on Google or any of the other applications. Any other questions? Yeah?
On my laptop or tablet, whatever you call it, in my book club, I only get, there's 6 of us, but I only get 4 pictures, and then I have to go to the next page and I get 2 people. How can I get them all on the same screen?
It might be the size of your tablet, may be limited to only 4, but on the top right-hand corner, there's typically something here called View, and that view will allow you to see gallery. And that gallery, if you look at here, right now I have it as speaker, all right? That's why I'm just all in one person here, but if there was 10 of us and I went and hit gallery, it would have it broken up into all the squares. So check to see what your options are under view. Immersive is kind of something that's been new, and it's come out so you can have backgrounds in your screen. If you're choosing to use backgrounds, be really careful, because you may end up having, if you don't have a blank screen behind you, you end up quite often having issues with the way it looks. It might look up choppy. So here right now, we've got Sheldon coming in. Dr. Sheldon, hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you on the full screen, and you're going to take over from here. When do you need to introduce?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Don't want to take over your show. Okay, so I'm just going to go in and I'm going to put you in speaker view, and now you're going to take over. Okay.
Hi, everybody. Very nice to be able to speak with you this evening. I'm here to answer any questions that you have. I understand that everybody's well versed with the conversation
Turn the sound up,
this
please.
evening. So there could be questions that you have that I think I should take for the half hour to pretty much just step with you. And I'm happy to answer any questions from the floor with the group. So
Can you try now? Dr. Salaba?
did you not hear me what I was saying before?
No, it kind of broke off. We're trying to get the audio to come up. For some odd reason, it's going through the speaker. Which one do we want? Okay, try it now.
Can you hear me here?
Much better. Yep.
Yeah, it's better.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. You know, I appreciate everybody coming together tonight and allowing me to speak. I'm really here to answer questions for everybody this evening. I don't know if I need to go through like a complete discussion of how we've arrived at where we are, but I would think that people in your membership in a group are likely hearing misinformation coming from the government, and I'm open to answer questions to any of that. So I'm comfortable with this being an interactive forum, and happy to answer anything that anybody would like to ask.
Hey, has anybody got any questions?
Can you explain where they're at right now?
Can you explain where you're at right now?
There's been like no indication from the government to come back to the table. So really we're in no different of a position as when we went into service withdrawal at the beginning of September 1st. So we really need the government to start the government is really putting out a lot of misinformation. They're trying to
government putting out right now?
What information, misinformation is the government putting out right now?
That's a broad question. Um, oh, you know, do you want to be more specific?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think we should be more specific, because I could start talking for a while on that.
Well, the government did say that you won't come to the table. I read a news article on that.
Okay, I think that's a really good place to start. So, we met with the government on August 5th for 2 hours, and after 2 hours, they declared that we were too far apart. We had proposed a mediator who was Bill Kaplan, and the government accepted him as a mediator to move forward with. So, we engaged with Bill Kaplan for 2 days, and what I would say to you is, on the first day, the government came with sort of regional analysis in the other provinces of what optometry services are being paid for that were completely incorrect and out of date. Our organization provided information that was conflicting with that, and conflicting by a lot. Like, they had Saskatchewan providing eye exams for seniors in a province where seniors pay out of their pocket for an eye exam. They had Quebec paying $28 for an eye exam. They pay $106 for the same eye exam that we provide to seniors in Ontario. So that was kind of the scenario on the first day. On the second day, our organization provided a counter proposal to the government, and they went away and left it there for 9.5 hours. They didn't come back to us. The mediator popped in periodically every 2 to 3 hours and said they need more time. And at the conclusion of that 9.5 hours, which is our second day of mediation with them, they again declared that the parties were too far apart. And 2 hours after that, they announced what their proposal was through the media, and started negotiating in the media with us, and that's sort of what has unfolded from there. When we go into a mediation or an arbitration system, our organization is spending about $17,000 per day in order to sit there with them. They showed nothing during those 2 days that indicated that they were interested in solving this problem. And, we're asking them to commit to covering the operating costs to deliver eye exam services in Ontario. Every other province resources these services at a level or above what would be required in order to pay these operating costs, but Ontario refuses to do so. So everything that is spun out from that point where they started negotiating in public, which is a bad faith tactic, has really, we have no confidence that they are going to sit down reasonably with us and come to a reasonable solution. That's not what their interest is. They're happy to see us continue to provide services where you're paying a large portion in order to provide the service, and that's really where the problem comes from. The second, the Ontario government commits to paying what our delivery costs are for that. That's our baseline minimum. We want them to pay the cost for our staff and our rent, our utilities, our equipment, and if they agree to pay that baseline, we will sit down with them. But the way they're behaving isn't giving us any confidence or faith that they're willing to work reasonably in this regard.
Anybody else have a question, sir?
What percentage of revenues do OHIP-funded eye exams make up out of 100%?
Well, 70% of the
you're not a union, you're an association, you don't get, your optometrists don't get strike pay. How much is this financially hurting?
A lot.
So it's a
To be
big
really
sacrifice.
honest with you, it's definitely a lot. Like the government is starting to say things. I saw something today from a conservative MPP where they're saying that the government had no intention of ever paying the cost for OHIP services. They expect them to be subsidized by self-paying patients between the ages of 20 and 64, and by selling glasses and contacts and other types of services that we provide. So they expect the paying public to be subsidizing children and seniors in their practices. And I think that that is starting to surface as an attitude is very clear that they have no intention of ever paying what it actually costs for us to deliver these services to people. And like when I say 70%, that's like under normal circumstances, we provide over 4 million OHIP insurance services across the province on an annual basis.
We were speaking about this earlier, just at our table, and it's my understanding that you, the optometrists are just not doing eye exams for all funded people. But we were thinking about people that have serious eye problems. Is it true that you can be referred to an ophthalmologist for serious eye issues and that would be covered by OHIP?
Did you hear that?
I think I did. She was saying people with serious eye conditions can be referred to the ophthalmologist and be covered for those conditions. Did I get that correctly?
Yes.
So the answer to that is absolutely, and anybody that has an issue with their vision that they think is an emergency, or their vision is deteriorating quickly, or they're in pain, any of those emergency type situations, we want patients contacting our offices, and depending on where we are in the province, the types of resources that are available to us, we're going to either see them ourselves and not bill OHIP. We're going to, if it's an eye infection, like communicate with the family doctor and make sure that the family doctor is able to write them a prescription. Or if it's something serious like a retinal detachment where the person is in severe pain, we would be referring them to an ophthalmologist, or if an ophthalmologist doesn't exist in a community, an emergency department where an ophthalmologist can be called in. So we're going to take that patient and ensure they are guided through the system in order to receive the care that they need.
I'm gonna actually make a comment to that. My husband actually had an issue with his vision last month and called all sorts of optometrists to see if he could get in as an appointment. He's 65, just turned 65, and they flatly refused him. And even though the doctor had a referral for him to go, they wouldn't still take that referral. So I can see the frustration, because he spent 6.5 hours at RVH, our local hospital, trying to get in to see, and all he ended up getting was the doctor that was on staff. They didn't bring the ophthalmologist in or anything along that line. So unfortunately, there is a disconnect in a way based on that issue. So how do you address that?
You know, I think it exemplifies how delicate the eye healthcare system is in Ontario, and it's why the government requires reinforcement to take action. Like if we're going to distill this down, like, can you imagine a healthcare system without family doctors and how that would function? So that's what optometrists are for the eye care system in the province. And I think everybody on this call tonight will understand that
Would your organization submit to binding arbitration if the government was willing to do the same?
That's a last resort. It's a long-term process. You know, I think if they were willing to go the route of finding arbitration, this is a big problem. People need to receive service, and the fact that we don't have binding arbitration currently is what allows the government to exploit us with these services. So if the public demanded that was the next recourse, I think that it's a viable option to get a solution. It's something that is going to take a long time. It would need a lot of expense. Would we do it? The answer is yes.
What can the public do to get the government back to the table? What can we do?
You know, I think at this stage, it really is picking up the phone or going into your MPP offices, especially if you live in conservative ridings, and making them understand that they need to action on this. Like, this is, we're not the only healthcare providers that are in this situation. Midwives are in a similar situation, and they've been battling government for over a decade with no resolution in sight or compensation for their services. They're valuable. I just read that nurses in long-term care homes, like the RNOA, has been fighting the government for 15 years, and they just had a positive ruling at the Supreme Court. It took 15 years, millions of dollars both organizations are spending in order to sort of advance their causes in those ways. And, you know, the government still has to act on compensating them properly. So, I really think we're moving into an election year, calling them and making them understand that rhetoric and status quo and gaslighting about pointing fingers at who is what. People understand that $5 in 32 years to provide a half-hour service doesn't reflect what's happened with the bills. And if the government wants to say that they provide these services to people, they can't partially pay them. They have to pay them. Like, that's how we ensure sustainability for systems in the province. And right now, like, this is demonstrating how delicate it actually is.
Yes, sir.
Are we at risk of a two-tier system?
And again,
Are we at risk for a two-tiered system?
like, honestly, I wouldn't think so. Like, all we're asking for to resource this appropriately to cost, it's $150 million. That's the number, folks. So we get paid about $150 million to provide 4 million services on an annual basis. $150 million brings it to cost of delivery.
any more questions for Dr. Salaba? Dr. Salaba, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight. We're streaming this live to our members too, so I think you're reaching a fairly broad audience. CARP, of course, has been in favor of optometrists being paid fairly. And I did reach out to my local MPP Downey yesterday for a comment, but did not receive anything back. We wish you well. CARP is working for you. We want you to be paid fairly, and we want this to be done and over with so our seniors can be looked after. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us tonight.
Well, thank you for having me, and I think you had that on the exact right note. We want to be able to go back to being able to care for our patients and take care of them. This is not a comfortable position for us to be in and to be putting our patients in. And I don't know. I think it's unfortunate that this is sort of what it takes to get the attention of governments in Ontario, and I appreciate all of your support, and we want to get this fixed. So thank you very much for having me, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you once again. Good evening. Thank you. I hope everybody enjoyed that. I want to thank Janet for being here tonight and helping us with this. Last minute she came through and helped us enable us to have Dr. Salaba on tonight to answer your questions. So I'd like to present this plaque to you upside down.
Thank you.
And I also have something for you. Where to go? This is a pin making the difference. We appreciate you. So thank you very much. I'm sure everybody appreciates you being here tonight. And we're just going to take a break now before the mayor comes. He's due to be here at 8. And then we'll have the 50-50 draw before the mayor presents. So team coffee over there. You just have to sanitize before you touch anything. Thank you.
those types of significant. How are you?
We're all Robin Banks now.
How are things?
I told Sarah that a lot of commercials and if it came with and then the band that I like getting to report. They're already
Oh, yeah. Great ride,
Yeah, well, he's telling you. So, before that.
So frustrating. Not as easy as it should be. Disconnected me, and I was wondering if yesterday about that. Mid-morning Had the race part of done.
Well, try it.
Anyway, I'll back up with you. I'll have
Hello, everybody. Let's call on board member Adam Richards for 1 moment.
Hi everyone, how's it going? Can you hear me? There we go. Nice. So tonight we planned on streaming the meeting both to Facebook and YouTube. Unfortunately, Facebook totally fell through, and on YouTube's end, the video stopped working. So we've got an audio stream that's going out. It's beautiful. It sounds fantastic, but unfortunately, the video component is gone. It might be a bandwidth issue. It might be a hardware issue. But for those of you looking for the recording of this meeting, it will be up and live on Facebook in a couple of days. Just wanted to keep you guys in the loop. Thank you.
Thank you very very much, Adam, and I would like to thank Adam, and I'd like to thank Claire and Roger, 3 board members who really stepped up over the last couple of days to help me put this all together. And thank you guys, you're great. Before Janet goes, I'm going to have her pull a ticket for the 50-50 draw. Ticket ending in 505.
Bingo.
Bingo.
Just to verify it. Appreciate your generosity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Always nice to have a pleasant surprise.
Worthwhile.
And tonight, it is a great pleasure and it's an honor to have Mayor Jeff Lehman presenting COVID and Recovery. Where do we go from here? Mayor Lehman?
Well, good evening, everyone. How's the audio? That'll come through? Good enough. It's a huge pleasure, actually, to be here in person. My first in-person meeting was with Ontario's Big City Mayors Caucus. I currently chair that group. It's the mayors of the 29 largest cities in Ontario. Once you reach 100,000 population, we teach you the secret handshake and you get to join the club. We've been meeting much more regularly throughout COVID, often to push the government on various matters related to the pandemic, sometimes to just bring the municipal perspective, and often to work together, whether it's John Tory sharing his approach to vaccinations and getting that out in a city of 2.5 million, or whether it's one of our smaller members talking about ways that even smaller cities can help small business. It's been an unbelievably unusual time. It is a cliche to say these unusual times, but I can tell you that the first message I'd give you today is that we here in Barrie can be quite proud of many of the things that we've done as a community to respond to COVID. We certainly had very difficult times as well, most specifically when the Delta variant arrived and went through Roberta Place. And that, for me, was, I think, probably the most difficult week, as I'm sure it was for many in this room who may have known people who lived or worked in that facility. But throughout the course of the pandemic, our city's response, and by that I mean the community, not the city of Barrie, has been characterized in the vast majority of cases by wanting to support one another. And nothing actually shows that better than a Facebook group. It's funny, you were going, the recording of this will be up on Facebook, and hopefully some of the people in that group can see it too. There is a group called Barrie Families Unite, and many of you may be familiar with it, some may be members, 12,000 strong now. And that group was put together in the early days of the pandemic and grew very, very quickly with the specific goal of helping people who needed a hand, whether it was with groceries, medication, and it evolved into an organization that now actually has rental space, holds a warehouse, warehouses donations, operates a give and get, and contributes volunteers to many other good causes, COVID related and not, around our community. But what I thought I'd do tonight is just talk for about 15 minutes or so and try to leave lots of time for questions. And I'll give you sort of 5 minutes on where I think we are, and then a little more time on where I think we go next. So, you know, the experience of the pandemic, without going right back to the beginning, but we've all become much too familiar with a brand new phrase, social distancing. And we had this guest speaker at Ontario Big City Mayors on Friday, and he made a wonderful point. He said, you know, it never should have been called social distancing, because what we needed was physical distancing and social solidarity, by which he meant communities coming together and all of us continue to be engaged in a sense of collective purpose in the same way that we have been as a country whenever a difficult time was upon us, whether it was a world war, whether it was an economic depression, or whatever challenges came to face us. And this is very much the challenge of our time. There are others though, and I wanted to say that, you know, COVID, and then I'll start with the tough stuff. COVID made some things much worse. It made it tougher on people who were already isolated. It made it tougher on people who were at risk of becoming homeless, and the housing market here is just on fire. And I'll talk about that in a moment too, because I'm sure it's of interest to you and your members. So challenges like mental health and addictions and homelessness were made worse. And we had to try and adapt our response as a society to physical distancing. So you saw homeless shelters be given funding by the provincial government to use hotel rooms to try and support individuals who otherwise would have been sleeping in a gym, a church basement, or in another collective setting. We saw approaches to trying to provide treatment and therapy online. Never a perfect substitute, but at least the ability to continue to help people. And what it really did lay bare for us is that there was such a different experience during COVID. For those who had few resources or whose jobs were directly affected, this has been among the most difficult times you can imagine. For those who did have resources, did have a lot of connection, whether it was family or friends or community, they have managed to get through it and perhaps fare relatively well. We have this odd situation which economists call a K-shaped recession. The K-shaped recession is because there's one line going up and one line going down. And the line going up is that people who managed to keep their jobs or were in a sector, in some cases, that actually did well during COVID, have fared okay. In fact, some are in a better position because they haven't been spending as much money, because there was government support, and because real estate, construction, even some sectors of manufacturing. Imagine being a medical device company. Our largest industrial employer in Barrie is now South Medic, a medical device company that's up on Bell Farm Road. They now have 4 facilities on Bell Farm and St. Vincent. So for some, things went actually pretty well. The downward line of the K is for people in sectors like food, accommodation, tourism, personal services, who in many cases faced extended closures and a serious loss of business. And for many workers in those areas, there was emergency support to help them. Our jobless rate more than doubled in the first wave of the pandemic, and it's moved up and down since. But now I get to the optimistic part, which is that even in those sectors, we've now started to see a bit of a turnaround in our city. And again, I'll get to the construction and housing situation in a minute. But for the food and accommodation sector, fun fact, there are over 400 restaurants in the city of Barrie. They employ more than 7,000 people. And in fact, we think that number might be higher because there, believe it or not, isn't a really great count of just how many people are on the payroll of all those fast food places and otherwise. There isn't really a central resource. And that sector, which was really suffering, has now started to come back. And it's facing a really interesting challenge, which is labor shortages. And I'm sure you've read about this. Because many of the people who worked in those jobs have found other employment. And now we face a strange situation, which is, though there are still struggles economically in our city, we're actually short of people. And there are a number of reasons for that. But it's a growing challenge, and not only in food and accommodation, in restaurants. I'm hearing that from manufacturers, and I'm hearing that from construction companies. And the shortages are in skilled trades, because we didn't train enough of our kids to pursue the construction and industrial trades. And in some other sectors where perhaps the wages have historically been low and the working conditions haven't been that great. So as we're standing here today, and I'll give you the sort of state of the union on COVID, I will tell you that, you know, one of the toughest jobs I had during this is, you know, I, as a leader in the community and as different, you know, politicians did, we had to try and convince people at one point to really change their behavior, to stop gathering, to follow the rules, and some people didn't want to do that. And we had to give a very, very dark message at one point. I remember recording a PSA that went out on TV and various different social media channels that was pretty grim. And because we needed people at that time to really change what they were doing to protect one another. I'm now changing my message a little bit, and this is obviously through the last 18 months in close consultation with both our local public health and with the Ontario government and so forth. And that message is that we're changing from having to push people to change their behavior to a message of, look, it's not now about fear, it's about learning to live with COVID in the world. COVID is not, contrary to what the previous president of the US said, it's not going to just magically disappear. COVID is a virus, an organism. It's going to be in the world alongside us, and we're going to have to learn to live with it. And what that will ultimately entail, we have fully yet to learn, but we know that vaccines have given us the ability to manage the situation, at least in terms of the impact on our healthcare system. And so as I stand here today, we have 8 people in hospital, that's it, across Simcoe Muskoka, all of Simcoe Muskoka, 8 people in hospital with COVID. That's a remarkable accomplishment. It's an accomplishment of a society that was still willing to get vaccinated to protect one another, because fundamentally, that's what made the difference in the 4th wave. So here we are, we're able to get back in person in a banquet hall, we're able to go to restaurants, albeit a little bit differently. We're able to do many things that we weren't able to do even a few months ago. And ultimately, I believe we are going to be able to do even more. Probably some basic precautions, at least until our children are able to be vaccinated. We're still going to have some restrictions and some limits on what we do. And your guess is actually as good as mine in terms of exactly when we might reach a point when this recedes into the background and becomes endemic, but probably early in 2022. So we face now a period ahead where over the fall and winter, if we can continue to do what we're doing, and there's a really interesting thing going on right now, which is that people are allowed to do things, but they're not yet doing them. They're choosing not to because they don't quite feel safe yet. I gotta tell you, I'm not sure I'd go to a Leafs game right now myself. That's probably a little bit bridge too far for me. Although I do many things that my friends won't do, like go out for dinner in a restaurant. I have friends who still aren't comfortable doing that for one reason or another. And everybody, has learned and adapted their own behavior and will make their own choices around these things. But, we as a society can be really proud of what this country did and what our region did to fight COVID, because it's allowed us, even after this very difficult time, to get to where we are. So now a bit of the look ahead. I can't talk about the situation in Barrie today without talking about this housing market. So the price of an average home in Barrie by one measure last month is over $900,000. You got that right. We are headed for an average home price of $1 million by the end of 2021. It's absolutely astonishing. The price of a home has doubled during the pandemic. And if you own a home in Barrie, since 2010, you've seen a 14% increase in the value of that home on an annual basis for 10 years, which is wonderful if you happen to own a home, because you've actually done better than the stock market, another fun fact. But the crisis of affordability that's creating and the fundamental change in the expectations of the next generation around housing are very, very significant changes to what many of us have grown up with and are used to in terms of our community. It's not just because Barrie's growing bigger. This is happening in all across the province. There's out-migration from Toronto. Interestingly enough, 35,000 people left the city of Toronto in 2020. Another 20,000 have already left in 2021. Most of them went to other cities in and around Ontario, and Barrie is one of the hot sort of destinations, and that is why you are seeing these bidding wars and all the stories you've seen out of the real estate sector over the last year. But this creates enormous challenges. If you're a young family trying to buy a house, $900,000, you're not making twice the income you were at the start of COVID. Very few are. And that puts home ownership, single detached home ownership, out of reach for all but the relatively wealthiest in our community. And so you're seeing what is a natural market shift, one that's not an entirely bad thing. So, you know, I really optimistically, in January of 2020, I called 2020 the year of the crane in Barrie, because we were finally going to see the apartments built that would create more housing for a broader range of housing for people in our community. And of course, COVID came along and slowed a lot of that down. But now it's very much happening. So whether we're talking about Bayfield and Hamner, or Little Lake, Veterans in Essa, or Yonge and Ashford, certainly downtown, we're starting to see the cranes go up. And not everyone's comfortable with that, right? Because for many people, Barrie is not a community where they want to see urban development. But the reality for us is, number one, our young people can't afford anything else. And we have had such a shortage of rental housing in Barrie over the years that we now have the third highest rent in all of Canada. We briefly surpassed the city of Toronto. For 2 months in 2021, the average rent for an apartment in Barrie was more than Toronto. This is, you know, unbelievable for somebody who grew up here, and Toronto was always, of course, the big city with its own completely different kind of economics and situation. So we do need more apartments, and the trick with that is to put them in places where they're going to be appropriate and benefit the city. I didn't hear too much about an apartment at Bayfield and Hamner, because Bayfield's a busy street. And downtown, the opportunity exists to create more customers for the shops and services and really rebuild the daytime economy of our downtown in a way that has been a challenge, to be frank, since the 60s, when particularly retail shopping started to move to the Bayfield Strip. So if we want a stronger downtown, and if what we mean by that is busier streets with more people going to businesses, shops, services, safer streets, then we need more people living in and around the downtown. And I believe what's coming now is going to finally get us there. And I think we got an early little look at that with Open Air Dunlop this summer. I don't know if many of you had a chance to go, but I can remember 6 years ago when we tried some pilots of pedestrianizing Dunlop Street, and it was dead. It was so dead that some of the merchants asked us to stop early to let the cars back in because they thought we were killing their business. Now it's just the opposite. We have our downtown stores and merchants telling us that it's actually increased their business and that they would actually welcome more of it. And I'd love to hear some of your feedback on that as well, because I think one of the other lasting impacts of COVID, to the theme of this talk, is that we're thinking about public space quite differently. You know, we didn't think about, before March 15th of last year, we didn't think about the fact that we needed to space out. That really wasn't a thought, was it? Now we're thinking about it, and we're thinking about the fact that outdoor, in some cases, is safer. And when we do something like Open Air Dunlop, or the patios that are on Dunlop Street for the restaurants, it's livelier, and people enjoy it. And so, you know, it was really interesting to me that we tried sort of 2 experiments in this during COVID. We tried closing Lakeshore on weekends to let people walk and cycle. Nobody used it. Even our faulty pedestrian counter was not accurate. It just did not work. We did it on Dunlop, Open Air Dunlop. It worked brilliantly. And that's because I think people wanted to go. They wanted to shop local. They wanted to sit and have a coffee on a patio. They wanted to go and have a meal outside. And it was safer. So, you know, public space is a piece that I think we are going to be looking at after COVID, to understand if there are other areas of the city or places that we can energize in that way, where we can create a place that people can really enjoy being in. Especially for the 6 months of the year that we can enjoy that sort of thing. The other thing we did during COVID was to speed up some construction work. And so we finished the downtown sidewalks and road ahead of schedule. We were also able initially to make progress on the Harvey Big Bay Point Road Bridge, and then that ultimately got slowed down. But now it's done and open, and the bit of news I can give you now is on Monday, Council approved the property acquisition for connecting Bryn Drive. And that's the remaining major north-south link that we need to help with traffic in the south end. The The highway bridge was really important because between Mapleview and Essa, there's no other way to get across Highway 400. Every other pair of interchanges in Barrie, there's a bridge. Ann Street, Sunnydale, St. Vincent, Tiffin. But in the south end there isn't, and that meant all that traffic over the years, increasing traffic, was going through Essa and Mapleview. And now we've got another way across. Bryan Drive will create a north-south connection that will also take some of the pressure off other routes. So we tried to expedite some of that work and get moving on it during COVID as well. And as we look ahead now, I think if I had to tell you what the major challenges are facing our city, the high cost of housing is right up at the top of the list. And that's because it affects everybody. If you are lucky enough to be in your own home that you own, perhaps you escape the immediate impact of it. But I can tell you, your kids, if your employees are trying to find housing, we are now seeing situations where companies are trying to find housing for Barrie workers outside of Barrie because we are so short. And it's a symptom of a good thing, which is that a lot of people want to live in our beautiful city. And our economy is doing relatively well. But it's not a situation that I would say I'm proud of. I think our city needs to make sure that we have places for everybody. And of course the impacts on the marginalized folks in our community, people who are unhoused, is particularly severe. Because if you're trying to find a place on $400 or $500 a month, good luck. You're not going to find it here. So that's a major challenge. And as you know, I think council as we navigated through our pieces of the pandemic, trying to keep an eye on the bigger issues that were affecting our city. And I can tell you now, as we start to look ahead, that's really where our focus needs to be. And I think we're into the last year of a council term, and the last thing I wanted to mention are 3 task forces that are coming back to council related to that bigger picture. One is, well, both small and bigger picture, I suppose. One is a performing arts task force, because in the last 2 years, Georgian Theatre was closed and Fisher Auditorium ultimately was not salvageable for use as a performing arts center. We are the only city our size without a proper place for theatre, symphony, dance recitals, all of those great things that come out of our community by way of cultural events. And so we have a task force that is to report to council around Christmas time on what the next step should be there. I can tell you that they're likely to recommend building a facility on the Barrie Central site, and that is one that can replace Fisher Auditorium in the sense of being a key piece of our downtown. Related to that's the second task force, and I asked Deputy Mayor Barry Ward to chair this one. Councillor Jim Harris is chairing the Performing Arts Task Force. The second one is the West End Revitalization Task Force. Anybody who's been downtown knows that east of 5 Points is doing really well. There are very few vacant storefronts, if any. The situation on the streets is busier. The public spaces are now pretty new because of the work that's been done. And there's been a lot of energy, I think, and growth. West of 5 Points, we've still got some struggles. And here we must not ignore the fact that we have an opioid crisis, which is poison drugs affecting our community, and that got much worse during COVID. There are measures coming and additional facilities coming to try and help those folks who need treatment options and need support. But the West End as well really does need an economic boost. You know, for years, our approach to downtown, and you know, my dad was chair of the downtown BIA back in the late 80s. And the thought was, at the time, if you just made downtown kind of like a mall, you cleaned up the public spaces, maybe dressed it up a bit, maybe marketed it a bit, you could compete with the malls as a retail center. And the reality was, it was a good thought and it improved our downtown, but we needed more. And over the years, there have been other additions to those strategies. Some of you may remember the Patty Zeno's plan, which was based on the Mount Tremblant and Blue Mountain concept of the village. The culture plan, which saw culture as a real driver for our downtown. But now I think the major piece in the approach that we need to take in the West End, I have been pushing for years for us to convert the bus terminal building into a food market, similar to the Byward Market building in Ottawa. We are going to be moving the intercity buses over to the Allendale GO station, the platforms that are there, so that whether you're taking a train or a bus, it's all in one spot. That will allow us to use the downtown terminal building for something else. And the West End Revitalization Task Force is going to report on that to council, and the potential to use that as a food market, as well as kind of complete the last little bit of the waterfront that we never finished. We did this wonderful renovation to our waterfront with a boardwalk, a bigger park, and all of the additions that you've seen there, the Splash On Water Park for the kids, which has been a huge success. But there's one little corner, right at Simcoe in Toronto, opposite, or just past the marina, where we still got bits of the old road that are parking lots, there's some gravel, there's a couple of berms. It was never finished. And I think we have the opportunity to finish the park and create a really great public space there that will be the connection between our waterfront and our downtown. Then the third task force is housing, and that one I'm leading. And I've talked a little bit about it already. But my closing thought on that is, as our community changes, and as we seek to provide a range of housing for everybody, that everybody can afford, one of the things I think we really do need to look at is we've got these malls. And I don't know how much longer malls are really going to be malls. If you've been through the Bayfield Mall, you know how much it's changed. If you've been through Kozlov, you know how much it's changed. Georgia Mall's still doing really well. And there's always going to be great stores and uses, and there are great stores, and I love that Center grocery store at Bayfield. There's always going to be great stuff there. But malls have changed, and Bayfield Mall in particular, about half of it is office space now. What I see on the mall parking lots is an opportunity for us actually to start introducing some medium density apartments. These are routes that have a lot of transit, the shopping is right there, they tend to be really well located for other community uses and facilities, and we can really revitalize what is now, let's be frank, a commercial strip. It's been our golden mile, our commercial strip, for about 50 years. And that will continue in its own way. But I think we can now start to have a little bit of residential in the areas along there where it fits. And I don't know if anybody here lives in the Heather Street apartments, or if anybody plans to live on the north end at Bayfield and Hamner. But there are really good opportunities to live close to shops and services and not face the kind of challenges that we face in other areas in terms of trying to put an apartment building where people don't want it. So that's one of the key challenges for this council and will be for the next council, is where can we build sensibly to ensure that people have a range of housing, whether it's apartments or townhomes. And yes, we are still building new single detached homes. Hope you got $1 million in the South End. And we have all the facilities that will go along with that. We're going to build new rec centers, new library branch is coming in Hawley early next year. But over time, we really have to change the way our city grows. And that ultimately will be how we ensure we have a city for everyone. I'm sure I've talked longer than my 15 minutes. Yeah, a little bit. So I am going to stop there, and because I hope to answer questions for you and address the issues that you have. I do want to thank CARP. CARP as an organization has only grown in strength in our community. Its advocacy is well known across the country, and having a strong CARP chapter here matters a lot. As we try and deal with some of the changes coming out of COVID and really take an approach that remembers and puts at the foremost when it comes to services for our 55+ community, what the needs of your membership is. So thank you for the work that CARP does, and with that, maybe I can take some of your questions.
I live downtown, I miss the piano.
Oh, I do too. That was fun.
And some groceries nearby would be nice. But several years ago, I like to bike. I belong to the Ganaraska group. There's 30 of us that go out twice a week biking. Really is wonderful. Midland Penetang is great. Even Elmville is super. Coldwater. Barrie leaves a bit, and I was told several years ago that every time you redid a river, there was going to be a bike trail along there. I find it hard to find it. from where Tascona and that motel was to Innisfil Street. I'm scared to walk through there
Oh.
myself to see, but I thought there was supposed to be a bike trail there. And then I'm seeing across from Central Collegiate, is there gonna be a bike trail along
Yeah.
that river?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Yes, there is. So what's happening on that site, of course, is a huge development, which by the way includes a hotel, which is something we've tried to get downtown for years and years. They, as part of their, what's called their site plan, had to build in that connection. So not only do we want people to be able to walk through their site from Bradford to the waterfront, they need to be able to bike. So the internal road there has a bike lane as part of it. But I think that what you're referring to is probably something I was talking about too at the time, which is that we try and retrofit bike lanes when we redo roads. And the challenge with a lot of our water courses is we'll own a chunk of it, and then there'll be a piece of private property, and then we might have another chunk of it in the green area. The projects to redo, right, which would include those trails, are part of what we call stormwater management, where we try and naturalize a creek to deal with some of the severe weather we're having, and at the same time do the trails. We have not made much progress on that plan because of the cost. And one of the biggest challenges that's faced us as a city is the deficit, the infrastructure deficit in terms of roads and pipes, trying to catch up on work that wasn't done or was delayed, has delayed some of the call it the newer projects even further. So there is more to come. I guess optimistically as well, I would say that as we started to do what we call these road diets, where we take a 4-lane road that's not busy and make it a 3-lane road, we then add the bike lanes, right? And that's been pretty successful in the areas where we've done it. One of the big challenges with that is, we'll do a segment, then the bike lane ends.
Yeah.
And as somebody who used to bike a lot more than I have during COVID, but it can be a little frustrating and at times a little frightening. So I know what you're talking about, but watch for more.
George?
When you talk about repurchasing the shopping malls, are you talking to the developers like RioCan as well?
Yeah, it wouldn't be the city that would actually purchase them. What's happening right now is I'm being approached in some cases by REITs, real estate investment trusts, that are shifting into this business. So for those who don't know, the big development on Bradford Street with the towers, including the hotel, is Smart Centers. Smart Centers is the biggest commercial landlord in the country, built power centers everywhere, home of Walmart and many other big box uses. Their ownership believes very strongly that there's probably not a lot more future in big boxes in retail because of the shift online, and so they're piling into residential all across the country. Vaughan Center, the tall buildings they built there is an example. So I would expect that, there's, and REITs own 2 of the 3 malls in Barrie already, so they may choose to do that themselves. But to this point, we have not, in our planning policy, really permitted this. And our new official plan, which was on planning committee's agenda earlier tonight, actually shifts that thinking a little bit. And I think anybody who knows Highway 7 in Markham, there are stretches of Highway 7 now where you've got apartment buildings that are closer to the highway and you've still got the shopping and commercial uses around them. They've created sort of neighborhoods with apartments and shopping there. That's what I see, but it'll be done by the REITs rather than the city. And yes, we're talking to the owners. Yes?
Do you have a plan for the public parks for next summer to avoid some of the problems that we've had this summer?
Like the overcrowding?
Like the overcrowding, yes?
Yeah. So that was probably the toughest issue, So I have weirdly, I have emergency powers right now because of the state of emergency. The mayor is able to simply sign a bylaw and not go to council. I've done 7 emergency orders under COVID. 4 of them were to do with parking at the waterfront. To give you a sense of, that was such a concern and a challenge. I just signed new rules around parking into effect to try and dissuade the crowds. We changed a couple of things. We banned tents. We said barbecuing only in the pits that the city provides. And we introduced some pretty expensive parking charges for out-of-town folks, as you probably know, $50 on the waterfront for the day. People still paid it. I think the question will be next summer, what kind of distancing is still expected? I will say, even with the situation we saw this summer, which was better than last year, but still not great from a distancing point of view, especially at Centennial and also at Tyndall. We did not see a lot of community transmission of COVID in that environment. And that's because outdoors is just that much safer. So I think the concerns that I heard in the community actually weren't really about COVID or distancing. It was about people parking and blocking driveways, leaving garbage, not being able to access some of the facilities as a resident because it was so crowded with visitors. And I thought about doing what Innisfil did and actually turning people away. But I actually stopped short of that. Because number one, the public health evidence was pretty clear. There just wasn't a justification for doing that. And then the question became, well, are we turning them away because we don't think that we can manage the situation in the parks itself? So we changed the rules in the parks, and that seemed to deal with some of the biggest concerns. The other obvious problem was, the washrooms and the facilities were closed, and then we ended up with real problems because of that. So I think if we face a third summer of COVID, and we're all hoping we don't in any way, we probably will continue with some of the restrictions that we've put in place that are there now. They expire around now. We don't need them over the winter, but we might well have them next summer if we need to.
Have you thought, I presume that you don't wanna make it just for residents only?
Well, that was the Innisfil solution. I actually stuck poor staff members at the gate of Innisfil Beach Park to turn away the people from Bradford. It was just a bridge too far for me. I felt it was too, it would reflect very negatively on our reputation as a city. People have family and friends that come from out of town. Most people are respectful. I thought if we could deal with the specific issues around parking overflow, the garbage, the tents, then maybe we could deal with the problems themselves without sort of giving us as much of a go-away visitor's reputation.
What if we just did like Johnson's Beach in Tyndale?
Yeah, Johnson's is a challenge because it's so small. And in theory, you could have a capacity restriction there, and that's what some places did with the beaches. Again, as our city's growing, I remember making a bit of a speech at council that said, parks are backyards for people who don't have one. And some people come from out of town, but our people go to other places too. And to me, there is a line and a judgment call that says we still want to allow people to use public spaces, even if they're not in their municipality.
But if we're wanting to do higher density with lots of condos and apartments.
We need more public space.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I will go to others, but your point is well taken and something we're thinking about for sure. Yeah.
For this lady here.
Thank you. I have a concern about, question, how is the city of Barrie going to be dealing with the huge developments that are happening in Springwater and Essendon at this time?
Great question.
We don't have the taxes, I imagine, from their property taxes, but it's going to be a huge impact on our city, and especially to the other comment about the parks. I'm sure that anyone that's been to Sunnydale Park in the last summer has seen it a nightmare. There's the parking, the everything that goes on there, especially when these sites are advertising things like our waterfront. The developer sites are advertising our waterfront, Sunnydale Park. We're gonna have the influx of traffic and all that to deal with. So what is the city planning on doing to handle that?
Yeah, so the ESSA growth is a little more modest. It's happening mostly in Angus, but there we're not as worried about it as Springwater. I would say that the Midhurst secondary plan we objected as the city of Barrie at the time, and we objected on the basis of exactly what you just said, Amy, that the roads The traffic, especially on the roads and Bayfield and St. Vincent that connect the Midhurst Secondary Plan to Highway 400, we're gonna see a dramatic increase in traffic because those are completely auto-oriented subdivisions, completely. Springwater doesn't have transit, so everybody's getting in their car and driving to where they're going through Barrie. So I would say that's the primary concern. And unfortunately, the province was not on board with helping us with that one. So I think other than the fact that we have asked that the county assist, especially with Highway 90 and Highway 26, and to their credit, they have. So 90's been expanded, 26 they're working on right now, just north of Barrie in Springwater Township. We'll see. I think inside Barrie, yeah, the connections from the north boundary to 400 are gonna get even busier. And I think for the people, the ones that are gonna be frustrated most by that, with Ferndale, I should mention Ferndale as well, be Ferndale and Ann Street particularly. There really isn't a way for us to block that or force a payment for it. With some of our other services, there is, and obviously anybody who's using a City of Barrie rec center or a library, we actually charge an out-of-town premium, but we do allow our neighbors to come in and use some of those facilities. The waterfront parking was not popular in Stonegate, which is that new subdivision in Springwater on Barrie Hill Farms Road. But I maintain that that was the right thing to do because our residents paid for our waterfront, and in this case, we could use the parking fees to help clean up and deal with some of the impacts of the increased traffic.
Just a quick follow-up on that. I was, because I do have a young son and Portage View is right across the street from my house. And besides the fact that it's just a traffic nightmare any morning going for anyone that's walking, and with the senior center that is there, it is a complete nightmare at that time of the morning for anyone that's walking or moving in that, because it just gets plugged up with people dropping off their kids at school. And also these, this development, particularly at the Carson Road in Ann, is touting Portage View as their public school.
Yep.
And I'm like, what more portables can we possibly fit in there, and the traffic that we have now I just can't see that happening. And I know that it's not in the city's purview because it is to do with the Simcoe County education, but did you know if there's any talks about handling that kind of congestion and traffic around the senior center or anything else that's there?
Yeah. One of my biggest frustrations, there's about 60 schools in Barrie. One of my biggest frustrations is the Simcoe County District School Board at almost all of the schools will not allow you to drop your kid off on the property. And so we end up with parents on the surrounding streets on the school run. And the conflict with neighbors, there have been actual physical altercations.
Yes, there have.
And yeah, I think, well, around Andrew Hunter was one of the worst spots, and not far away from where you're talking about. It is no end of frustration to me because there's no way it's safe, compared to creating a lane where Portage is a great example. You can drive in there, there's a parking lot on site, on property, and a separate exit. And, take them through. And if the school took a little time, and it's not the school's fault, it's the board's fault, to manage that traffic flow, it would be perfectly fine. I forgot the name of the school right beside the Holly Rec Center. It's not Holly Meadows.
Holly Meadows.
Oh, it is Holly Meadows, yeah. They actually headed down to a science, and they were actually doing it. And their kids were being dropped off onto a sidewalk and walking into the school on the school property. And I thought, I remember going to Holly one day and watching this. They had people marshalling them. It is so much safer than kids being dropped off on the street, getting out of the cars into traffic, and
Well, it's a concern because.
pretty frustrating.
It is a concern because the senior center there's ambulances that unfortunately have to make it into the senior center quite regularly. And they cannot, I just can't see that possibly happening. Like, what happens when it comes to a medical emergency situation?
Yeah, it is frustrating. So city bylaw ends up being called out or patrolling and trying to ticket people. People still pay the tickets. It's
Well,
amazing.
there's nowhere to park, there's
And
nowhere
there's the basic problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say, if I can a little bit, I walk down Wendell Heights 3 blocks every day for 8 years when I was a kid. Kids don't walk to school anywhere near as much anymore. And we have a little bit of like a social problem where we believe that, you know, it's not as safe for them walking to school today, and so we must drive them so that, you know, they don't run into a problem. You know, crime is down in Barrie 33% in 10 years. You know, that statistic just blew my mind, but Statistics Canada has reported on the crime rate every year, and they came out with a 10-year report. In Canada, it's down 14%. In Barrie, it's down 33%. And nobody believes that, right? But the numbers don't lie. And so our kids aren't less safe. They're safer. Cars are safer. They have emergency braking systems, many of them. And yet, we don't want to let our kids walk to school. Look, I'm guilty of this. I drove my child to school for many years rather than walking. And now we try and walk or take the bus. Gwen?
The proposed long-term care project down at the border of Springwater and Barrie, I'm interested in what's happening there because it's going to be a transformative culture, which is what we want in our long-term care homes. And Georgian College is involved too.
Yeah. So it was a bit of a surprise to me actually because they haven't approached Barrie yet. But that's okay because the way it works is you approach the host municipality and then the host municipality, if they like the development, approach the city. What this is about is there's no pipes out there. So, you know, if you're gonna have a long-term care facility, you need municipal water, you can't do it on the well. So they'll need servicing from Barrie. That's gonna be a bit of a challenge because they're at the bottom of the hill, not the top. We can get the water down to them, but pumping the sewage back up is not really feasible. So I'm wondering what their plan is there, and because it hasn't been in front of Barrie Council yet, I probably can't answer the question for you. I mean, I only know what I read in the paper. I would say that, you know, there's this issue right now in Ontario where the Minister of Municipal Affairs is issuing these MZOs, which is a Minister's Zoning Order, to expedite development. And, you know, he's done it for hospitals, he's done it for industrial parks. Generally, nobody objects to that too much. The host municipality might have concerns, but usually they ask for it for those types of facilities. Then there's situations where they're doing it for residential development, and that's been much more controversial, especially where it's big development. I would say though, I supported the MZO. I'm somebody who doesn't believe in minister's zoning orders. They're a workaround caused by a planning system that's a little overbuilt, and if the home municipality is doing its job, you should never need the minister to step in and overrule your town council. However, in Innisfil, there was an MZO for Tollendale Village 2, which is literally across the road from Barrie on Big Bay Point. It's on a piece of land that everybody thinks is in Barrie because it's beside the Bob Rumble Home for the Deaf.
Yeah. Who? No, we're still listening to the mayor speak. Do you wanna come over and come inside?
Yes, she should. So I supported it there because we need the seniors housing, and Tollendale Village is very well managed development, and it made sense from a planning point of view. So if we are approached for something similar by Springwater, I think probably council would say yes, as long as there's a servicing solution that isn't expensive for Barrie residents. Yeah.
At Essa Road and Mapleview, in the northeast corner, how is that development? Where are we with that?
Yeah.
There's supposed to be everything there, from a medical facility building, you know, apartments, a library. I don't know if the library's going there or not.
Yeah.
For Holly.
So, no, the library in Holly is going into the Mapleton Plaza where the Food Basics is. So, you know, the Food Basics Plaza right at Mapleton Nest. There's a double retail unit in the plaza that's empty.
Okay,
And that's going to be Branch Library, our second branch library. It's very exciting, actually. And the developer of that site, when they were putting together their initial concepts, I think put a lot of stuff on the map in order to create more of a, I guess, an exciting concept for the city. That one's gone pretty quiet. They didn't get a very positive response to the amount of density they were proposing, in part because I think we all know what Mapleview is like, what the rest is like. Also because it was across the street from 2 single detached subdivisions of homes. I'm sure that site will be comprehensively redeveloped and master planned. I don't think we'll see what was initially in the papers that proposed to us. It's just, you can't really do that much density at that kind of a location successfully, because again, even with our transit system, even with a lot of bus service on Mapleview, the traffic impacts are pretty overwhelming. And as a location, you don't have a water view, you're not really close to a major employer, kind of close to the industrial area, but it's a tough proposition. So I think that one was a bit ambitious, the first cut. I'm sure there will be a second cut. I expect it'll be a little more modest, but it'll still be very substantial. It's a big site, and they're 2 arterial roads. It's not a bad spot for, in my opinion, some medium density. John?
Jeff, gotta ask the Mayor Barrie, the Love Barrie sign, quick update. I think
Councillor McCann came in with his 150,000. That was reported sort of late on Monday. Still a few unanswered questions, but it looks like that step was achieved. So what that triggers is the design process for the sign. So now we'll go through the design, and I'm on the committee, Mike's on the committee, a few others are on the committee, head of the Public Art Committee, and we'll see what a Barrie sign designed by a committee comes up with. I mean, I offered my opinion even though you didn't ask. I think we should do something that's a little different than the typical one. A lot of cities have done the white letters spelling out the name. The Ottawa one is delightful, mostly because of the lighting. But I think we might be able to do something. I'd like us to do a little bit of a twist on it, so it's unique. That's my take. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I only found out about this today, so I haven't checked it out myself, so I hope you can shoot me down.
Okay.
I was told that there is no washroom in the GO train bus place in Allendale, am I correct?
Yes, you are correct. The one that was built by Metrolinx. The new one that the city is building absolutely has washrooms.
Thank you.
So that building will start construction in a few months, and it, yes, absolutely. It's got proper washrooms. Yeah, kind of important. Maybe one more final question?
Why do we have food trucks?
Why don't we, or why do we?
Yeah, food trucks on the waterfront.
What, sorry, why
don't we?
don't we? Great question. Hey,
I think it would bring more business to
Yeah.
downtown than less.
Yeah, I'm actually a fan of them now too. I think we had that brief sort of food truck court at Chase McEachern Way on the parking lot during COVID. I think the historic resistance to food trucks came from the restaurant industry. They didn't want the competition. Like nobody who runs a restaurant wants a food truck parked outside. I'm pretty sure Pie is so busy that they could probably survive a few food trucks on the central waterfront. Actually, I will tell you my own view is that, when I was talking earlier about livening up sort of public spaces and how we think about them a little differently now because we've been going outside for 18 months, we're trying to get outside more. I don't think it's a terrible idea to have a food truck come to the parking lot in a neighborhood park and you just set up some tables outside and chairs. Maybe you get somebody to come and play guitar or something, and create a little spot. And they do this in a lot of cities around the world where they close a lane on a street or create, they call it a pop-up public park or square. And we could do a version of that with food trucks in our parks and probably create a really enjoyable spot for the parents while the kids are at the playground. I have some experience with this. I've sat on a lot of our benches with coffee that I had to buy from a drive-through on the way. And I often sit there thinking, wouldn't it be great if there was a food truck there and maybe some tables and parents could talk to each other. This guy that we had at the Big City Mayors talking about social solidarity, he calls it human infrastructure, the places where people naturally gather. And if any of you take your kids or grandkids to the park, you'll know all the parents are sitting there looking at their phones. And it's so sad, isn't it? Because they're wonderful. I have Sheer Park in my neighborhood. I love that park. It's got a great playground, great atmosphere, beautiful big trees, and everybody sits there. Wouldn't it be great if we just had a few spots to sit and talk and maybe get a bite of food or some coffee while we were there? So watch for more on that. Anyway, thank you so much, CARP. What a delight to actually come and talk to a room full of people. Boy, there just hasn't been enough of this. And thank you all for coming tonight.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for doing this. I know everybody here is appreciative. We had some problems streaming, but it will be up on YouTube and Facebook in a couple of days. So thank you for making a difference. And also.
Oh, wow.
Him.
Perfect. Fantastic.
No,
Not a perfect. Oh, makes a difference.
thank you very much.
Seriously.
We really appreciate you coming in. And I'd love to corner you, but.
Of course.
Mm.
I'm gonna run.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Next month is our AGM, and we're planning some special things that we'll come up with. But we have a great speaker. He's a geriatric pharmacist, and I think you'll really enjoy it. So keep that in mind. I think it's November 16th, third Tuesday of the month, 7 o'clock. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Louise.